world around you. So here is an example. This is a poem I call The Perfect Club. We banish every hypocrite who professes to be just, then throws a child's life away and says that they must. We exile the power-hungry who sit upon their thrones, and then do nothing good for us, but leave us all alone. We do not care for greediness, nor liars flaming red. We believe their mouths are sour from everything they said. The overproud may strut outside, they'll stain our reputation. Our club is flawless yet, I wish it were a nation. So, anyone have ideas about what this poem means? What is this poem talking about? So, for instance, when I say we exile the power-hungry who sit upon their thrones and then do nothing good for us but leave us all alone. What does this little passage mean? Maybe if somebody is just sitting up on a high pedestal saying, oh, I'm so powerful, and not doing anything good for somebody. So even though maybe they could do something good, then they're not. So that might be what that means. We do not care for greediness. So people who are greedy or people who lie, we don't want those people. So basically this poem is writing about this perfect club. It would be one where there aren't any greedy people, there aren't any power hungry. That means that you really want to be powerful but not doing anything good. So we don't want these people. But at the same time, wishing that it were kind of more reality. Our club is flawless, yet I wish it were a nation. So that poem might reflect on some of the flaws that you see. So for instance, if you wanted things to be perfect, you could write about that. Another thing you can write about, you could write poetic responses to natural disasters, car crashes, scientific discoveries, local news stories, weird news stories, riots, or even celebrities. Pretty much you can reflect on everything that happens. So raise your hand if you've heard about the recent earthquakes in Haiti and Chile. Right, a lot of us did. You might have seen it on the news, you might have heard it from your parents. So you could write a poem reflecting on the destruction there. And so you can write poems reflecting on pretty much everything. So when you write about a current event, you could make a list of words used to describe the event in the news media, or look up your own words that relate to the event. For example, if you were writing a poem about a hurricane, you could make a list of words and phrases used in news articles about the hurricane, including place names. So this is an example from Hurricane Katrina. You might make a list of words. So for instance, some words that would have to do with it would be Gulf Coast, New Orleans, Louisiana, Category 3 storm, Tropical Depression 12. So those words all kind of show the progression of the hurricane. So when you are writing about something, say a natural disaster, you might make a list of words that have to do with that event, and then you could use some of them in your poem. Next, you could use an encyclopedia or online source to discover the words and phrases scientists use to describe hurricanes, like counterclockwise, Coriolis effect, spiral cyclonically toward the storm center. Kind of interesting phrase there. So here's tip number 2. Keeping a running list of interesting, specific, descriptive words provides a great source of inspiration and is a good way to make your poem more realistic. Or sound realistic. So for instance, if you were writing about a hurricane, you could use some of these words that scientists use to describe hurricanes. Instead of saying hurricane this, hurricane that, over and over and over again, you could use some different words. And also show people that you take the topic seriously. So here's activity number 2. Choose a current event to write a poem about. So what is a current event? I'm sorry? An event that just happened. Very good. An event that just happened. So something like in the news. Explore at least 2 different news articles or news programs about the event. So what I'm going to do is we can look up something that happened recently. So does anyone have an idea for what might be a good topic to write a poem about.
Anybody have any ideas? No? No? It's heavy racing. A helicopter crash last Thursday. Okay. We recently had a helicopter crash in Arkansas.
Oh,
That's
okay.
all I can say last day.
So a helicopter crash in Arkansas. So would anyone like to tell me exactly what happened or what you know about that story?
Well, it was a rescue helicopter. They were going somewhere during a storm, and then they hit something, and they just crashed.
Oh, I'm very sorry for that. So yeah, you could think of a current event saying that happened locally, like for instance a helicopter crashing. And then maybe think of some of the words that would relate to the event. So helicopter, storm, and once you find out maybe more about exactly what happened, like what it hit or why it went down, then you could think of that. And then you could write a poem about the event using some of the words that you collected. So that might be something to do. What is another current event? Anyone like to suggest?
Just a minute. Okay. Haiti earthquake.
The Haiti earthquake. That's right. So what would be some words that relate to the Haiti earthquake?
Devastating.
Devastation. Very good. Actually, let me insert a new page and we can maybe write some of these down. So devastation. Anyone want to tell me what is the capital of Haiti where a lot of the devastation happened? It's called Port-au-Prince. Oops. Okay, so that might be another word. What would be another word related to the Haiti earthquake? Destructive, right? Deadly. Any other words? Disaster. Homeless. And let's get one more.
Okay.
Heartbreaking. Yep, very good. Okay, so here is our list of some words after the Haiti earthquake. Devastation, Haiti, Port-au-Prince, destructive, deadly, disaster, homeless, heartbreaking. So these are all words that have to do with the earthquake, and some of the words would probably apply to a lot of earthquakes. Devastation and destructive, I would say, would apply to most earthquakes. So how do you think we might be able to write a poem from these words? I'm sorry? You could make it rhyme, so maybe you could write a poem about the Haiti earthquake that would talk about maybe what happened. So, or you could write a poem maybe reflecting what do you think about it, how does it make you feel. So how do you feel when you hear about something like this on the news? Yeah, you feel really terrible for everybody. So why don't we practice writing a reflective poem? So we can write a few words so you feel sad. I felt sad. What is another word we could use?
Helpless.
I felt helpless. And let's think of one more word. How did you feel?
Disgraceful. Hopeless. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Scared.
Scared. So let's see, what are some other words used to describe? So devastation. All the devastation. that had, that had come to the nation Haiti in because of the earthquake, maybe, or so I felt sad, I felt helpless, I felt scared. All the devastation that had come to the nation Haiti. What else could we put after that? Any ideas? Well, let's go back to our list of words. Oops. Port-au-Prince, destructive, deadly, disaster, homeless, heartbreaking. Oops. It was a disaster, and it was heartbreaking. Okay, there we go. So here is our poem. I felt sad, I felt helpless, I felt scared. All the devastation that had come to the nation, Haiti. It was a disaster, and it was heartbreaking. So you can write a poem coming up with some words that you would use to describe an event, like the earthquake in Haiti, and then you can write a poem using some of those words and how you felt. Poets reflect on what they see and feel. Poets can play with reflections. So you can distort a reflection. And here's tip number 3. Play with your reflections. Try distorting or exaggerating an event or creature. So for instance, here is a reflective poem I wrote called Backyard Battle. A pair of grubby hands in creep. A pair of dirt-flecked eyes in sleep. A pair of pants in need of change. A muddy, grubby, dark melange. The ivy lurks about the wall. The monarchs watch the berries crawl. The spark of war among the grass. Between the humans, not the last. The gloves of cloth shall reach to pull. Lo, behold the ancient skull. With trusty shovel, spade, and knife, we'll rid this garden of its strife. So does anyone have an idea about what I'm talking about?
Okay.
A battle? Okay, so this is a kind of interesting battle. This is a backyard battle. So have any of you ever had one where you have to pull up lots of weeds, where the weeds are going all over your yard? That is what I'm talking about. Surprisingly, and I know it's all time friends, but if you look at it carefully, oops, let me get my pen over here. A pair of grubby hands and creep. So if you spend all of your, if you have to pick up all those weeds and you have to dig around the dirt, your hands will probably get kind of dirty. A pair of dirt-flecked eyes, so you get that dirt kind of. A pair of pants need to change. If you're going outside to do gardening work, your hands will get dirty, your pants will get dirty. It's all going to be really muddy and kind of dirty. The ivy lurks about the wall. So if you have ivy, usually you want to get rid of that because it spreads all over. The monarchs watch the berries crawl. If it's like blackberries, if it's being invasive, maybe. So basically, what I'm talking about is I was helping my dad out with yard work, and I thought, I could reflect on this and write a poem. Maybe not at the moment I was doing the work, but definitely. And so I turned this normal, everyday thing, weeding, taking out weeds and ivy and stuff, I turned that into a poem that's making it kind of a battle. It's a big battle between us and the weeds and the ivy and the grass. So you can turn something as basic, as simple as doing yard work into a backyard battle poem. You can magnify a reflection. You can make it bigger. You can reflect by asking questions. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the prettiest of them all is the little example I have there. So, here is a poem I wrote called What Majesty Makes Every Day. What majesty makes every day, who commands the bird's song? What malevolence makes all the dust and every footpath long? What serenity makes the lake sparkling demure? What mischief disturbs its peace with eternal furor? What cleverness has shaped us to swim in shining sea? Well, I know one thing for sure, it wasn't you or me. So that was a poem about how the cool things, the bad things, definitely it wasn't you and it wasn't me. So kind of how, sort of saying we're kind of unimportant compared to some of the things, serenity and cleverness, majesty. So the qualities that I was talking about in the poem. Now, to make your poem more interesting, you could look at the same subject from different points of view. So here's a tip. Look at your topic from a new angle. For example, you could write about a tree house from the point of view of a bird, or even the tree. So what do you think a tree would think of a tree house? Oh yeah, the tree might think, oh, why make a treehouse on me? It's all heavy, it's on top of me. It might be a little, the tree might complain, kind of, trees could talk. What do you think a tree would think of a treehouse?
It would take it off me because it's made of itself.
It would like it, or it would not like it? I didn't quite hear.
It wouldn't like it.
It wouldn't like it, maybe, yeah, because it's made of wood. And if you have to spend all day lifting up something that's kind of, like for instance, if you had to spend every day lifting up something, I don't know, maybe lifting up another person, that would kind of maybe be how a treehouse would feel. It's all made of wood, he has to lift it up every day, it might be heavy. So yeah, he might be mad that a tree got cut down or something. And the tree also, who knows, maybe the tree would get tired. Maybe the tree would like the treehouse because all the kids come and play on it. But there are many different ways of looking at the treehouse. Normally, I might write about a treehouse from the point of view of me or a person, but I could write about the treehouse from the point of view of an owl. From my point of view, the treehouse is a mansion, or from the tree. From my point of view, the treehouse is really heavy and big. So here are some writing ideas you can try on your own. Write a poem about something that makes you want to throw plates. If something gets you really mad and you kind of feel like you would throw a plate. There's actually a restaurant in Japan that lets customers throw plates at the wall, which is pretty wasteful. But if you're super, super mad, you really get that feeling, why don't you write a poem instead of throwing plates? You could write a poem based on news stories, so watch the news carefully, look for ideas for poems. Write a poem inspired by a quotation or an idea. So remember what we did with Plato's quote, life is but a sojourn. We turned that into life is a journey. We wrote about the traveler on the road racing ahead for something new. You could write a poem that exaggerates an event. Who would like to tell me what exaggerate means?
You give like too much information, it didn't happen.
Kind of. Exaggerating is if you make it bigger, like tall tales, kind of. So, like Paul Bunyan. We know that there probably wasn't somebody who was as tall as trees and all that, but maybe there was somebody who was really tall, who was named Paul Bunyan, and somebody just stretched out, they exaggerated until we got the tall tale we know today. So, for instance, tall tales are examples of exaggeration. When you exaggerate something, you make it bigger. Remember that poem I wrote, Backyard Battle, about fighting all the weeds? Well, maybe it was just picking up weeds and throwing them in the garbage. And that's not a battle. I stretched it, I exaggerated it, I made it bigger so that it was all dramatic. So you could write a poem that exaggerates an event. You could write a poem that calls attention to something tiny that's often ignored, like a bug, for instance. You could write a poem about a bug if you wanted. So those are some great writing ideas you can try on your own. Now I wanted to read you a couple of poems from Dancing Fingers. I have a whole section in here actually dedicated to reflective poetry. And it is called Reflections. So pretty obvious, but let me just go on here. So as you can see, this is the little illustration that is in here. I can zoom in a bit and show that to you. Oops. And this is kind of like me, and I'm sort of thinking about all these things. And yeah, so that's the illustration on there. So I will read you a poem from Reflections. All right. Let me think. Okay, so here's a poem I call Looking Back. A snowdrift in the summer, a blooming in the fall, bright sunshine in the winter, there isn't spring at all. We looked up at the lofty sky, watching birdies passing by. Those prophets ominous, the burnt black crows, but some didn't care and wiggled their toes. Goodbye, I say, in quite a craze, goodbye to those wishing days. So it's kind of a nonsensical poem. You don't quite get what's happening. At the beginning I say, well, it snowed in the middle of summer. So is that normal, snowing in the middle of summer? No, probably not. And a blooming in the fall. The fall is when everything loses its leaves. So stuff popping up and growing and blooming, that would be a little weird too. Bright sunshine in the winter, if it was all kind of summery in the winter, that would also be weird. There isn't spring at all. So the seasons are kind of out of whack in this poem. And then this part is sort of out of place. We looked up at the lofty sky watching birdies passing by. So it could maybe symbolize maybe the kind of the out of placeness of this whole, of the seasons being out of whack. And then the burnt black crows, they're kind of showing that something is going to come and wiggled their toes. So some people didn't care about what was happening, how everything was sort of wacky. And then at the end it says, goodbye I say in quite a craze, goodbye to those wishing days. So it could be that back in those days you would wish for something. It could be that those days are just a wish, maybe they didn't happen. So this poem is really up to interpretation. There are lots of different ways that you could say it. And then, let's see, Backyard Battle is right there. And then here's another poem. It's called Right Here. I wished myself a fairy's grove. I found myself a troll. And my grove turned into grotto. I lost my parasol. I always hoped to find the blue upon the cloudy sky. Instead, it turned most ominous. We all began to cry. I never did seek for a family or intelligence so dear. I always knew I had the things I needed most right here. So right here is this poem about you want a ton of things, but every time you get it, you get something different. So I wished myself a fairy's grove. I found myself a troll. You want to be all beautiful and pretty, and you find yourself being really ugly, being a troll. My grove turned into grotto. I lost my parasol. A parasol is it's kind of an umbrella, and a grotto is a cave. I always hoped to find the blue upon the cloudy sky. So maybe you wanted the weather to be nicer, but instead it turned most ominous. So ominous is kind of bad, nasty weather. So every time this person wishes for something to be better, for something to be bluer, for something to be greater, then the worst happens. And then at the end, the narrator, the person whose I, says, I always knew I had the things I needed most right here. So you really don't need to wish for those things, was kind of the message. And then, let's see, so, yeah, so that would be a kind of fun poem to think about, that you don't really need a lot of things that you wish for. Maybe being more beautiful, or, and that you have a lot of things that you need most, like family and friends, right here. So that's kind of what that means. So, reflections is probably one of my biggest sections in Dancing Fingers. And it has a lot of poems about various topics, like traveling and life, yeah, so lots of different things. Oh, and here's one last one, called Habitat. Fields of flowers are not for me, a meadow bed's too damp, and the roughness of the sea would break my reading lamp. I suppose the forest's nice, but for the hostile eyes, a farm just might suffice for allergies, not my demise. I do not like to associate with the pollywogs, and very sad would be my fate if I sank into the bog. A manor upon a moor, all the dusty tomes, but even so, the kindest door would be that of my home. Anyone want to guess what that poem means?
She wants to do things, but she's too scared.
Maybe wanting to do things but being too scared. So for instance, roughness of the sea would break my reading lamp. That's a very good point. Yeah, so might be wanting to do things but being too scared. What's another way of looking at this poem? Well, if you remember the last line, so basically it's saying, I don't want to live in a field of flowers. I don't want to live in a boat. I don't want to live in a forest. I don't want to live on a farm. I don't want to live in a swamp. I don't want to live in a manor upon a moor, so a really big house. But even so, the kindest door would be that of my home. So what is the author saying in the last two lines? Even so, the kindest door would be that of my home. She doesn't want to live anywhere but her home. Very good. The kindest door would be that of my home. So the greatest place to live would be the place where she really belongs, her home. Yeah, very good. So when you write poems, you can reflect on things like, oh, maybe you said before, I'd love to live in a bigger house or in a meadow or something like that. If you've ever thought of that, but ultimately you think, okay, I like my home. So yeah, those are some of the things that this poem means. So Dancing Fingers, there's a whole big section called Reflections. It has all my reflective poetry. And if you get the chance to read Dancing Fingers, I would advise you to check that out. So those are a few of my poems. Now, who would like to tell me one thing you've learned today?
Write a poem or whatever you want. Don't just say I've got to write on this and
Don't just, I'm sorry?
don't just say I have to write it on this one thing. Let your imagination go.
Yeah, let your imagination go. It doesn't have to be just writing a poem because you have to. It should really come from your imagination. Something that you can think of. And imagination is really important because it's imagination that lets us create new things. It lets us come up with new things. And yeah, so definitely use your imagination. Who else would like to tell me one thing they've learned today? I'm sorry? You can write about anything. Very good. Yeah, you have lots of topics to write about. You can truly write about anything. You could write about a ladybug. You could write about the earthquake in Haiti. There are so many topics for you to write about. For instance, if I zoom out right now I'm in my studio, and I look at, let's say, a map. So I'm going to look at the map over here. Then I could take a look at this map and let my finger point wherever. So it looks like my finger pointed to Birao in the Central African Republic. Okay, so maybe I could write a poem about Birao. You can do weird things like that. You can look at a map and point wherever and write a poem about that place. Yeah, so you can write poems about anything. Who else like to tell me one thing they've learned?
Let your imaginations go anywhere in life.
Let your imaginations go anywhere you like. Very good. And let's get one more idea of what did we learn today? I'm sorry?
Don't stay on one idea.
Don't stay on one idea.
Don't stay on one idea. Well, yeah, you don't have to stay on one idea, but what can be fun is let's say you take an idea like a tree house and look at it from different angles. So you could look at the treehouse from the point of view of me. You could look at the treehouse from the point of view of a bird. You could look at the treehouse from the point of view of the tree. So yeah, you could don't stay on the same idea, but you could look at the idea from different ways. That might be fun. Okay, well, now, if you have any questions you would like to ask, you can go ahead. Do you have any questions you would like to ask me about poetry, about writing, anything?
Okay.
How many books did you write?
How many books did I write? I have written 2 books so far. One is called Flying Fingers, and it is a book that has 9 of my short stories as well as tips on writing and some of my early poems, so that's Flying Fingers. My second book is called Dancing Fingers, and I co-authored it with my older sister Adriana. And Dancing Fingers is a book of all my poems as well as some tips for writing poetry in the back. So yeah, it is. I've written 2 books so far, and I'm hoping to write many more. I'm sorry?
What state are you in?
Oh, what state am I in? I am in Washington State. Does anyone know where Washington is?
Everybody better know. Anybody else have a question?
writing since I was 4 years old. When I was 4, I started writing out with pencil and paper, and then when I was 6, I started typing up all my stories. And by the time I was 7, I'd written about 300 short stories. So when I say short, I mean pretty short, but I can actually show you a binder of some of the work. This is all the stories that I wrote. As you can see, it's really, really thick. These are some of the stories that I wrote when I was 6 years old. So a big, big, thick binder.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
Shelley?
If you write a poem about tigers, how would you describe them?
I'm sorry?
If you wrote a poem about tigers, how would you describe them?
If I wrote a poem about tigers, how would I describe them? That is an excellent question. As a matter of fact, I have a tiger on hand right here. That's very coincidental that you asked that question. So let's see.
Together on that one.
Yes, you must have read my mind or seen that. But so if I look at my tiger, I would probably describe it as orange and furry. So yeah, thinking of some words that would describe the tiger: orange, furry, gigantic, fierce, fearsome. Yeah.
Alexis, Danielle, and Daniel Strange with their books. Alexis, Danielle, and Daniel Strange with their books.
We're sorry, that was an announcement interruption.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, that happens sometimes. Yeah, so think of some words that may be orange, striped, furry, gigantic, fierce, fearsome, powerful, quick. If you could think of a word that would describe how a tiger might pounce. Yeah, so those would be a few words I'd use to describe a tiger.
Yvette?
How do you get the time to write all this stuff?
How do I get, I'm sorry?
She said, how do you get the time to write all this?
How do I get the time to write all this? That is an excellent question. Well, I would say, since I write a lot of poems, I'm able to write poems really quickly in a few minutes. So it doesn't take me too long. And if I write a poem every day, then I'm able to have 365 poems by the end of the year. Unfortunately, I don't always write a poem every day. Sometimes I'll write 2 poems on one day and no poems on the day after that. So I would say I write about 100 poems every year. So since those don't take very much time, I'm able to write a lot of them. As far as stories go, those might take me longer. It might take me a month, 2 months. And so with those, I find the time usually every day. If I have a little spare time, I might do some writing. I might work on a story or something. And yeah, so that's what I would do.
What is one of your favorite poems that you have written?
What is one of my favorite poems that I have written? Good question. I actually have a poem. It might be in Reflections, actually. I will look for it. It is called Weeping Willow. And it is a poem that I wrote kind of about living under a weeping willow, which was a very interesting idea. But it might be under nature poems, actually. Let's see, 1 second, let me find it. Yeah, it's under Leaves, Stars, and Stones, nature poems. Okay, here's Weeping Willow. I should like to live under the weeping tree and not do chores at night. I would watch the fairies dance and play by morning light. I would not have work to do, my days would be carefree. My Davenport, the sturdy branch, the birds, my symphony. My parents' calls would go ignored, instead I'd hear advice from my friends the ladybugs and cats and rats and mice. The weeping tree always consoles with gentle touch of dew. I'd like to live under the weeping tree, wouldn't any of you? So that's a poem I call The Weeping Willow. Yes, it's probably my favorite poem.
Amy?
What was the first poem you ever wrote?
What was the first time I ever wrote? I would say when I was 4 years old, I can't think of the first thing I ever wrote. I know that one of my early stories was this one about a boy who walks into a restaurant and eats a cheeseburger. So not exactly the most exciting of stories, but it was okay for a 4-year-old. Yeah. So I started writing when I was like 4, maybe close to 4 and a half. And, yeah.
Did you have to look through a bunch of dictionaries to find the meanings of words in poems?
That is a great question. Did I have to look through a lot of dictionaries in order to find meanings of words? Well, I'm lucky. I know a lot of words because I read lots of books that have big words in them, and I try to use them in my poems. So that's why you will see a lot of big words like panacea or Brobdingnagian. Those are some of my favorites. Brobdingnagian means extremely large, by the way, and panacea is a cure-all. But anyway, yeah, the reason I love using big vocabulary words in my poems is that knowing a lot of words is really handy. Like if you want to think of something, if you want to rhyme something, that's good to know. And also, if you want your poem to sound a certain way, you need these big words. So I do a lot of reading, I learn vocabulary, and then I try to incorporate those words into my poems.
How have you made up all those words in poems?
How have I made up all those words in poems? You mean how did I put them together?
Yeah.
Well, my way of looking at it is, so I didn't have to do the hard work. I didn't have to make up the words so much. To me, making a poem is kind of like making a necklace. You have the words, they're like the beads, and then you just string them together in a certain way. So if you string them together in a way that sounds good, that looks well, then you can create a pretty good poem. And remember, you don't really have to worry about whether your poem will be good or how it will sound at first. Those are some things that you can worry about later once you get better at writing your poems, and then you can edit them afterwards. So I would say it's a lot of practice. I've been writing poems for a long time, since I was 8, and so if you read some of my really early poems, the ones, then they were pretty, well, they weren't that good, I'll just say that. So yeah, practice makes perfect. And I'm not saying my poems are perfect now, but they're definitely better.
When did you start teaching kids from different places from the TV?
When did I start teaching kids from different places? Oh, over video conferencing. Yeah, that's a good question. I actually started doing this about 2 years ago, maybe 3. I think 2 years ago. So it's hard to remember. The years pass by so quickly. Yeah, so actually, my video conferencing system from Tamworth, they gave it to me. And so that I'm very lucky, and I'm able to connect with classrooms pretty much every day in different places. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was talking with students in Wyoming, and I asked them what makes their school special, or what makes going to school in Wyoming special, and they said, oh, well, we take hunter's ed, so they learn how, like, gun safety and that sort of thing, which is pretty interesting. I never heard of that before, and so, yeah, they told me a little bit about what made going to school in Wyoming special, and then I connect students in New Jersey, and I actually once connected to a class in Costa Rica, so it really does go everywhere.
Are you in a regular classroom also?
I wouldn't quite call it